this City form is just unbelievable and gets even more unbelievable, or probably even more believable, actually, week by week when you look at the performances.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, first off, a very simple question with a lot of very complicated answers, no doubt. What's going on?
So I've had a bit of a mental switch recently where, a large part of it, like there is lots of very viable excuses or explanations. Excuses is, a heavy word to use, but there are many explanations, and the injury side of things is undeniable. Like we're playing, musical chairs with our defenders at the moment. Like one's in, one's out constantly. That's not the right game. I'm on about the hokey cokey, I just want anyone out. But basically, every time we get a player back, someone else gets injured. We can't deny the impact that's had on the season. When you look at the likes of the long-term injury of Rodri and so on, and having Kovacic's out injured for a bit, and literally now Diaz is out, and Ake again. Like there's constant injuries basically. And Stones went off for half-time the other day. We can't deny the impact of that. But at some point, you have to look at the collection of players on the pitch and go, well, it's still a pretty decent collection of players, even if they're not fully fit, which they're not. You would expect at some point just a draw or two, at very least. Like the expectations aren't particularly high for me as a City fan right now. And I'm not the only one who shares that view amongst the City fan base as well. I know some people want more, some people expect less. But largely, I think expecting not 9 losses or whatever in 12 games and more than 1 win in 12, I don't think it's too much to ask. I think teams are finding it very easy to play against Manchester City right now. So when you look at all that and you look at the quality of the side that City still put out, even if it isn't the most confident, even if it isn't the freshest, and Villa are a very good side, admittedly, as well, so it's not that fair to judge it entirely. But you start to expect a little bit more and think, we should be able to do something here. The game against Man United in the derby at home, to throw that away in 5 minutes, a real head loss moment. You start to wonder if it's sort of symptomatic of something that a lot of people have seen coming, like the inevitable need for a rest or to go again after winning a treble, winning 4 in a row. I think these guys have climbed Everest a few times. They climbed Everest and they climbed the season after that. It's probably the second highest mountain in the world. And you can't keep doing that and not get exhausted, be it fatigue as in physical fatigue or mental fatigue. And I think we've reached a point where too many of these players have gone to the well too many times and they've got nothing left there. Like they really haven't. Guardiola's got so much out of them. He really has squeezed every tiny little bit of energy and ability out of them. But some of these now are in their 30s and some of these are tired. And to get yourself out of a difficult situation, it takes an awful lot of effort. And I just don't know how much they're in it. They're only human, I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them are sat at home right now thinking, I'm 33 years old, 34 years old, and I've been offered several $100,000 or whatever to go and play somewhere where it's really sunny and no one expects anything from me. And a small part of them is probably tempted by that. And that's not to say they want to go, but they're humans. And as soon as you start to think away, you've lost a little bit of yourself, you've lost a bit of the drive. And I think that's a natural end to this era that City have had. It happens to everyone, when you see pundits like, Gary Neville, who obviously has no reason to defend City, he was saying the same. It feels like the cycle's come to an end. And so I think it is that, because it doesn't feel like just injuries is a viable excuse anymore, because as much as the injuries play a massive part of it, I've got no doubt if they're all there, they play better. There is obvious gaps in the squad. There is obvious problems in the squad. Some are too old. We haven't got a backup striker. We didn't sign a backup defensive midfielder. Kyle Walker, unfortunately, he's obviously really, really on the decline, if not gone fully. So it's a combination of many factors. Too many players are probably looking elsewhere subconsciously. We know, like, at one point, Kyle Walker wanted to go, Edison wanted to go, Bernardo Silva wanted to go. There's a lot of people who've been told to stay or encouraged to stay, and legends in their own right, all these people. But I think they're thinking about the future. I think some people can't stay fit, which means they're not reliable. And I think a lot of these players are past it, and the squad is too small. It just is. A few years ago, having a squad of 20 senior players, it was enough because Guardiola likes this tight-knit group. But now the football's 10% longer. Also, football doesn't have a break anymore. It goes on through the summer. I know I'm talking a lot here, but there's so many factors, and I think it's just all reached the same conclusion where everything's imploded at the same time. And I think, when you're that good, sometimes the downside, the downfall can be spectacular as well. And I think City have just absolutely imploded. I think they have done. And I don't think this is fixable gradually. I think it's going to take something quite drastic because I think the wheels have come off, unfortunately. And I don't know if Guardiola even knows how to deal with it because he's never been here before.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the most amazing thing for me in terms of everything that used to make a Guardiola team great and make Guardiola great. He was able to get them to go to the well again and reach even greater heights and then do it again season after season. He kept that intensity up. He kept the desire up from the players. That all seems to have suddenly gone. But in the space of 2 months, it wasn't the case. I know earlier seasons, but earlier months of the season, you were winning games and not playing particularly as well as you had in previous seasons, but still winning the games. Yeah. I've never, ever seen a drop off from such heights to such low in this dramatic style in this short space of time. I mean, surely you've got to question the sort of the mentality of the players who've just been used to winning so much for so long. If they're now hitting this piece of adversity, massive piece of adversity, admittedly, but then straight away thinking, okay, maybe I would be better off elsewhere and stuff like that. That's got to feed into it. The matters on the pitch as well. If those thoughts are creeping into their heads.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, and it's not like I don't think it's always conscious either. Sometimes it'd be subconscious when you start to, doubt things, and these sort of little things as well. Where I'm not going to moan about Pep's legend. He's got so much credit in the bank. It's ridiculous. It's overflowing. But he said some things recently where he keeps talking about, how does this change? And he says, I want my players back. And he's talking about the injuries. And there's an element of wanting his players back metaphorically as well. Couldn't be themselves. I get that. But he has always linked it to injuries. And at some point, I start to feel, if you're constantly talking about we're going to be basically naff, until those players come back, and he said this is a season to suffer. What's that saying about the players on the pitch? And I understand the behind the scenes will be different. He's not saying, good job, guys. He's going to be trying to improve, and he's going to say this and whatever. But it's almost like, it sounds like there's a sort of public acceptance that, we're going to struggle an awful lot, and there's going to be a lot of bad results. And that's the reality. And I don't want him to pretend otherwise. But as soon as you start to publicly acknowledge that, do the players believe it too? And if the players believe it too, does that then become the reality? And there's sort of worry in my head that I don't think there is an obvious solution. And I think I worry that too many know it, including the players and Pep themselves. And if you know that, you don't believe then. So I think that there's a sort of really negative cycle there. And I think a lot of it's psychological. It's definitely fitness related. I know these players are just tired. They're exhausted. And some of these players just aren't fit. They can run, but they're not training. They're just turning up and playing football games, So I'm aware of that. I know behind the scenes, Guardiola will be trying to improve him and trying new things and all that kind of stuff. But the messaging and the coming out of the press conferences and what the players are saying, it just feels concerning, if I'm being honest, once again, I feel the only way things are going to change is by a very drastic solution. This is like a dam that's burst. It's not like, a little hairline fracture in the side of a riverbank. It's burst. It's absolutely burst. And I think at this point, there's no point pretending that the squad doesn't need a massive overhaul. And I know City spend a lot of money, but over the past 5 years, they genuinely have had a ridiculous net spend where it's been essentially, I think they're in profit actually on transfers over the past 5 years because of all the academy players and obviously like Sterling, Jesus, Zinchenko and so on. So I think at some point though, that only gets you so far, Big teams win and they spend a lot of money, and I think that's where City have been, and they do it well and they invest well. And I think City have not done that for a long time. Well, they've tried to, but they've got it wrong. People like Nunes and Phillips haven't hit the same way. And I think the only way this is going to change is, unfortunately, just accepting that you probably can't rely on a bunch of veterans who have been there so many times, or some players who are probably too young to be lent on. You can't lean on Savinho, who's just joined. You can't lean on Rico Lewis, who's very young. Even Oscar Guardiola, his quality is still pretty young, and he's there every single week as well. So I think basically, the City have to accept that they have to start signing some players because the squad's too small for one. Even regardless of the players, of the personnel, it is just too small. There's holes in the squad, given the amount of football. And I think some of these players have sadly shown that they probably are just a season too far. Well, that happens. That's normal. It's not I'm not going to panic over it. But at some point, you've just got to admit it.